Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, talk a lot about the Celtics on this show because, well, we're both based in Boston, and they've been the finals favorite since the beginning of the year. Obviously, I'm a diehard Celtics fan. You've been covering the team and watching them for years and years. I don't want to make you sound old, Sap, but you've been watching them since they were originally founded as the New York Celtics, which is impressive.
Yeah, I was there for all the years with Red Auerbach and Bill Russell and then John Havlicek, et cetera. But, you're not that far off. I started following basketball, I'd say around 1971. So that's over 50 years ago. And I remember as a kid going to Celtics Knicks playoff games. And then when I was able to get into the business, seeing the Celtics play the 76ers and the Bucks and the Lakers. And through the 80s, it was really fascinating. Sometimes you forget how lucky you were to be involved with that. But yeah, the Celtics are obviously one of the most talked about teams in the league because they're the favorite or one of the favorites to win the NBA championship. They have been all year. And, they have these incredible highs and these incredible lows. So that really works well for talk radio, right? Because, they're not a boring team. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this past week was a great microcosm of that Sap, as the other day they lost to the lowly Washington Wizards by 20 points. That was a low. And then last night they went into Milwaukee and they beat is putting it nicely, throttled the Milwaukee Bucks 140-99 on the Bucks home court, in a game that it seemed like the Celtics were trying to prove a point, and point taken if I was the Milwaukee Bucks, because it was not a competitive game at any point. And again, I think it was the worst. It was the worst Bucks loss of the season. It was one of their worst losses at home that they've ever had. And the Celtics just dominated from pillar to post there, Sap. And that's the Celtics that people are hoping to see. Well, Celtics fans are hoping to see, not the Celtics that 2 games ago lost to the Wizards without Bradley Beal by 20 points.
Really, you look at these two games and you're like, is that the same team that's out there representing the Boston Celtics? On Tuesday night against Washington, they're 11 of 44 from beyond the arc. Last night against Milwaukee, 22 of 43. So 25% on Tuesday night, better than 50% on Thursday night. They're so reliant on the three. When they shoot 40% or better from three, they almost never lose. When they shoot below 40%, they're a 500 team. And I don't think they have to be so reliant on the three, Jet, because their two best scorers, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, aren't great three-point shooters. I think the offense would be even more efficient if they're going to the basket, settling for maybe some mid-range shots, and then that would also set up more three-point shots for their better three-point shooters, whether it's Derek White or Malcolm Brogdon, Al Horford, maybe to a lesser degree, Grant Williams. That's how I would do it, is have Tatum and Brown really dictating the offense by taking to the basket, getting that mid-range game going. I know it's only 2 points, but two's better than none. But then you also set up your three-point shooters, and now you really stretch the defense, opens up even more lanes for Tatum and Brown. Kind of work it that way. When they're able to do that, they're nearly unstoppable. They were unstoppable last night. And on the defensive end against Milwaukee, look what they did against Giannis. Now, Giannis still had 24 points in 25 minutes, but it took him 27 shots. The Celtics make Giannis work for his points, right? And Giannis always has to work for his points because he's not a real good three-point shooter, and he can be sketchy at the free throw line. But because the Celtics have a lot of good defenders that they can throw at him, I think they wear him down a little bit. You build that wall, you throw Rob Williams at him for a stretch, Al Horford, maybe even Grant Williams, and you make him work to earn those points. A statement game, yes, but there's still 2 games behind Milwaukee with 5 games left to earn the number 1 overall seed. They're going to have to sweep the board and hope Milwaukee loses 2 games, because the Celtics are 2-1 against Milwaukee this year. They're also 3-0 against Philadelphia. So the Celtics are 5-1 against 2 teams that, in theory, they're going to have to beat in the second round and in the conference finals to get back to the NBA finals. That's what's mystifying about the Celtics. They should be better than their record is right now. But when they show up and play like they did last night, that's when you say this is still a very strong title contender.
Well, that's why, again, that Washington loss was so frustrating, not just because of how they played and that they lost to, the Wizards by such a significant amount without the Wizards' best player, but it turned this Milwaukee Bucks game into a lot less of a meaningful game. Had they won, they would have been a game behind. It would have been a lot more and owned the tiebreaker. So it would have been a lot more of, an interesting finish down the stretch here. I don't think that they're going to catch Milwaukee. I don't think a lot of people envision that. And so it took some of the juice out of that game. That's why I think a lot of people were surprised that the Celtics came out so hot in this game, because it seemed like they had less to play for with the Bucks when the Bucks seemingly having wrapped up the 1 seed. But to the Celtics' credit, they came out like a house on fire and didn't let up the entire game. And they were led by Jason Tatum, had a ridiculous shooting night, 8 of 10 from 3, Sap, 12 of 18 from the floor, finished with 40 points. Jaylen Brown was really hot as well, finished with 30 points for himself. And like you said, they shot over 50% from 3, and that's I don't care who you are, when you're a team that shoots over 50% from 3, you're not losing. It's just not happening, and many times you're going to blow out the other team, and that's exactly what happened last night. So if these two teams do meet in the playoffs, I think the Celtics feel pretty good. Last year they knocked them out. This year they've played very well against them. But that being said, you can't say, oh, well, last time we beat them by 41 points, we have their number. It's a different animal in the playoffs, and certainly the Bucks will make adjustments and be better than this. But it certainly gives the Celtics, I think, some confidence heading into the postseason that they need, because they have not played well post All-Star break.
No, they haven't. They've been around a 600 team since the All-Star break. We started the season 21-5. They look like they were on their way to winning 65, 66 games, which is difficult to pull off in the modern NBA because of load management and difficult travel schedules and injuries to players. It's really difficult to pull that off. But, here they are. They'll be the number 2 seed unless Milwaukee collapses. They're going to play whoever finishes as the 7th seed. So you have to wait to see what happens at the play-in tournament. You probably want to avoid Miami because they're a team that's just going to make it tough on you. You can beat them, and you probably will beat them, but it feels like a 5-6 game slog against the Miami Heat. Against Atlanta or Brooklyn, more confident, get them out of the way, and in most likelihood, you're playing the Philadelphia 76ers, a team that you pretty much own. You've beaten them in the playoffs recently. You're 3-0 against them this year. Look, Philadelphia will have the best player on the court in Joel Embiid. But then after that, the Celtics, I think, are just a better squad than Philadelphia. But nice win by the Celtics. And we don't know how that would have played out if the Celtics had won Tuesday night, because they would have come into Milwaukee 2 games out. Maybe Milwaukee takes that game more seriously. Maybe there's more pressure on the Celtics. Maybe it's a different result. I don't know. That's what is, fascinating about the NBA, because the prior game, can sometimes dictate what happens the next game. Teams do have a tendency of bouncing back. Look at a player like Drew Holiday. He had 51 the other night. He was miserable last night, right? What do you have, 6 points? So,
Yeah.
you see the ebbs and flows of all the players in the league. Tatum has struggled last night, as you said, Jet, 12 of 18 from the floor, 8 of 10 from 3 to net 40 points. Like, how many guys in the league have a night like that? There's Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and not many other guys who can be that efficient. Tatum was that last night.
Yeah, the whole team couldn't miss. I mean, they were pulling up for him wherever they went. Al Horford even took a really deep 3, and he drained that too. So, everybody was feeling it last night. And it was an absolute slaughter. And so, yeah, maybe the Bucks take it more seriously, like you said, at the Celtics being a little bit closer in the standings. But it doesn't matter. Right now, the Bucks feel like, we just got our asses kicked by our main competition in the East, and the Celtics feel good about themselves. So, so it did have some meaning. And, if those teams do meet again, it will be in the conference finals. So we'll have to see how that all goes down, Sap. But that's in terms of what we're looking at for the NBA playoffs. But there's other NBA news. Is this we're waiting for a formal announcement, but it leaked the class of 2023 for the Hall of Fame. And it's got a lot of notable players and coaches on it, Sap. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit. And so the class is headlined by Dirk Nowitzki and Dwayne Wade. Other players are Tony Parker and Pau Gasol. Greg Popovich is finally getting into the Hall of Fame, and WNBA legend and coach of the reigning champion Las Vegas Aces, Becky Hammon. She also gets into the Hall of Fame. So a very notable class, Sap. And I think the interesting thing about this class is that Wade and Dirk, there's a significant debate on who should be the headliner for the class. I know I have my opinion, Sap, and I put this out there a while ago on a Twitter poll. But I'm curious what you think between the two of those guys.
Yeah, this class the six people we're talking about, it feels like there's three pairs, right? You got Dirk and Wade, who were rivals. They met in the finals twice. In both cases, the underdog won those series. Then you got Gasol and Parker, who are were phenomenal players, won championships. You could probably debate who's the better player, Paul Gasol or Tony Parker. And then, of course, you got Popovich and Hammond has been an assistant coach with San Antonio for a period of time, and now she's the head coach of the Las Vegas Aces. So we're not going to compare Popovich and Hammond because Hammond is in there, because of being a great player in college and in the WNBA. Although I think she's going to be the first female head coach in the NBA at some point, which is just an incredible achievement when it happens. So, but when you look at Wade and Nowitzki, they're weird players in my feelings because Wade was a 6'4" guard who wasn't a great outside shooter. Nowitzki, a 7-footer who was a phenomenal outside shooter, not really a post player. Yeah, not a great rebounder, not a great passer, but obviously an all-time great player. I think both of these guys are top 30 all time. That's where I'd put them in around, 22, 24, 26, somewhere in there, somewhere in that stretch of my all-time top 100 if I ever announce that top 100. So they're very similar as players. I do think that Nowitzki is more impactful than Wade because Nowitzki essentially invented the stretch four, which like every team in the league has right now. Like Al Horford plays the stretch four often for the Celtics. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns is a stretch four with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Lauri Markkanen, who's 7 feet tall, is a stretch four in Utah. It seemed like Nowitzki to me was the guy who invented that position. And you can make a case that he's the greatest player in league history to come strictly from Europe or from overseas. Now, I know Olajuwon was from Africa, but he came to the United States, played a little bit at high school, and then played at the University of Houston. Dirk came strictly from Europe. So you can make a case that Dirk is the greatest non-American in NBA history in terms of his whole lead up to being in the NBA. Kind of like at some point, maybe Luka surpasses him or Giannis surpasses him. But, let's put Dirk there now because he had a 20-year career. So, man, that's a tough one. I mean, Wade won more championships, but he won 2 of his 3 with LeBron as the lead guy. So there's that. But Nowitzki was able to beat Wade and LeBron in 2011, and Wade was able to upset Dirk in 2006. So pretty interesting companion pieces. I think as a pure basketball player, I'd probably take Wade because even though he's 8 inches shorter, he's averaged more blocks per game than Dirk Nowitzki. They're just kind of weird players. It kind of sums up the NBA today where the 7-footer is the better outside shooter than the 6'4" guy. But I think in terms of impact, it's more Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah, and they were both really clutch in their finals performances too. Dwayne Wade in his first appearance in the finals won MVP of that series, and Dirk, as you mentioned, MVP of his series against LeBron and Wade.
Don't mention that again ever.
Yep, sorry.
Don't mention the 2011 finals.
I love that finals. What a great finals. The MVP, the league MVP stands strong for Dirk in that argument too. That's a big tick in his favor, in my opinion. Wade, obviously no MVPs, probably hurt him that he did play with LeBron in terms of getting voting, but I don't think he was ever at any point considered, the best player or maybe a top 3 player in the league, top 5. You could certainly make a case. But yeah, I'm very close. I would take Dirk personally. Part of that is I absolutely hated Dwayne Wade as a Celtic fan, that he was a dirty player, and didn't have that reputation, but should have. So
he certainly was a dirty player. And part of it was that he got away with it because he was so damn good, but also like a good looking guy, great with the media. Like he didn't look the part, but
famous
he
wife
was a dirty player. Famous wife. Yeah. All of that. Charismatic guy, even on TNT, part owner of the Utah Jazz. I mean, he's a guy that you, in some sense, like, unless you're battling him. God bless you. Unless he's, going against your team, then you obviously are going to dislike him because, without question, a dirty player. Remember, he injured Rajon Rondo. Was it in a regular season game or in the postseason? Broke Kobe Bryant's nose. I mean, he was a dirty player for sure.
Yeah. So, again, it may be more personal dislike, but I would take Dirk. I do think it's pretty close. But it's definitely an interesting debate. I'm curious to see. Usually what the Hall of Fame does is they have, the headliner go last when they're being inducted. I will be curious to see who will go last, if it will be Dirk or Wade amongst those guys. The order will be, I think, telling to amongst how people view those two players, Sap.
Yeah, I think because Dirk was more impactful, maybe it's Dirk. But I think the Miami Heat at this point probably carry a little more weight in terms of the NBA compared to the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban's not the most well-liked owner in the league. I think Mickey Aronson of the Heat is. Pat Riley still is a pretty powerful guy in the league. So maybe they're going to push forward that Dwayne Wade is the headliner, but they're kind of like co-headliners. It's like when you have two great actors in a movie, who gets top billing. Another old man rant here. There was a movie that came out in 1974, The Towering Inferno, with Steve McQueen and Paul Newman. At that point, probably the two biggest movie stars in the world. Who was going to get top billing? Their agents actually fought over which character had more lines in the movie. So what they did on the poster is they put, I believe, Paul Newman higher but to the right, Steve McQueen lower but to the left. So that kind of was their way to negotiate it, that they were truly co-stars. So there's no way getting around that with the Hall of Fame, because someone has to go last, unless they come out and do a duet, which I don't think they're going to do.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah, it does.
By the way, I don't believe they like each other. I mean, they've been a lot of documentation about Dirk and how he was upset with how Dwayne Wade and LeBron James were kind of mocking him during that finals. Remember, he was sick. They were pretending to be sick, and then Dirk, ended up again. I love referencing that finals.
I told you, Jet, not to reference the 2011 NBA Finals. I'm going to pull my age card here.
We'll see. I just think that again, I'm Team Dirk in this argument, and we'll see how the Hall of Fame plays. And also, I think, like you said, Seth, then there's a debate between the next two guys, Pau Gasol and Tony Parker. Tony Parker, to me, Seth, he's one of my favorite players of all time. I think he's one of the more underrated players in NBA history. Obviously, he had the benefit of playing on a juggernaut team that just was consistently, in the finals, winning championships, never won less than like 52 games. But I think that Tony Parker was, again, an underrated player and obviously deserving Hall of Famer. Pau Gasol, great player too. But I would take Tony Parker in that argument, Sap. I think that, again, it's probably close, but Tony Parker always has been one of my favorites.
Parker did win the Finals MVP in 2003, I believe, or 2005, one of the Spurs championships. 7. And again, I don't want to reference that because they beat LeBron and the Cavaliers, although LeBron had no one on that
horrible team. Cavaliers team, just horrible.
I don't know how they made it to the finals. So, yeah, 2007, he's the MVP of the finals. Great player, one of the fastest and quickest players we've ever seen. And the thing I will look at both of these players, Jet, is it wasn't easy for them in a sense. Tony Parker had to play for Greg Popovich, who's notoriously tough on his point guards. That could not have been easy. It would be like being a quarterback for the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick. And how many times do we compare Belichick and Popovich? I swear they're related at some point. But that was difficult. But also with Gasol going to the Lakers and having to play with Kobe Bryant. Now, it was great to play with Kobe Bryant, an all-time great player. He wasn't the easiest guy to play with, but I think he respected Gasol so much. And I think the reason Kobe respected Gasol so much is a lot of the off-the-court stuff, because Gasol's such a cultured guy, multilingual, into art, into history, just a brilliant guy. I'm sure he and Kobe had some fascinating conversations, because Kobe's not only one of the greatest players of all time, he's also one of the brightest players in the history of the sport. Those conversations must have been interesting, not even talking about basketball. So Gasol, I thought, should have won the Finals MVP in 2010. Kobe ended up winning that in that 7-game series against the Celtics. It was a real slog of a series. I think Game 7 was 83-78. Kobe was 6 of 24 from the floor, but he did get 14 rebounds. Gasol outplayed Kevin Garnett in that series, pretty much from start to finish. I thought he should have got MVP. Yeah, these are two guys that are outside the top 75. They're probably closer to all-time 85, 90 in that range, which, there's no slight there. I mean, to be one of the 100 greatest players in the history of a sport that's, now 75 years old and actually more than that is pretty much an incredible accomplishment. Parker was so fun to watch, wasn't he? I mean, just the really teardrops that he had. He kind of invented that shot. A lot of the modern players today, John Morant, before that, Derrick Rose, kind of copied him on that. I would probably agree with you on Parker. I mean, he did win 4 championships. Gasol did win 2, but Parker, of course, was part of that San Antonio system that was just phenomenal. But again, interesting comparisons because you've got a big guy, Gasol, a 7-footer who was a finesse guy, but a better rebounder than Dirk. And Parker was more of a pure point than, say, Dwayne Wade, who was more of a shooting guard. But the takeaway I get from this class, and we're going to talk about Popovich and Hammond again, but is 3 of the 4 players are foreign-born players. These are like the sons of the Dream Team. When the biggest impact the Dream Team had in '92 was, Jordan, Magic, Bird, that incredible team. They went and just destroyed everybody to win the gold medal. It's how much it pumped up interest in basketball worldwide, and it kind of led you to Dirk and Tony Parker and Paul Gasol and so many great players that have come into the NBA, and that's why the NBA right now is deeper than it's ever been.
Yeah, and the guys who are dominating the league right now were influenced by guys like Dirk and Pau Gasol and Tony Parker. And, we're going to see a French guy at the top of the draft this upcoming year in Victor Wembanyama. You can believe that Tony Parker was a big influence on him for sure. How many Spanish guys have we seen come into the league? Pau Gasol, huge influence on them too. So yeah, without a doubt, Sap, the legacy continues. And just, again, it's tight. If you compare Gasol and Parker too, 4 championships, like you said, for Parker, 2 for Gasol. Each of them made 6 All-Star games. Gasol 2 times All-Second NBA team, 2 times All-Third NBA team. Tony Parker 3 times All-Second NBA team, 1 time Third Team All-NBA. Really, really very close. And you wouldn't be wrong picking either one of them. Parker, if you look at like some of the advanced stats or the stats from the just in playoff history and finals history, I know he went a ton, but Tony Parker's name is all littered on that list. Just a really clutch player who upped his game every time the Spurs were in the postseason, which was every year of his career. And so again, that's why I give the slight nod to him, but it's really close. And then I think, Sap, that's a great point that you made, is that they were influenced by the Dream Team, and now you're really feeling their influence on how many foreign-born players are in the NBA right now.
Top 3 MVP voters this year will be foreign-born players: Embiid, Jokic, and Giannis. And Luka probably could finish 4th, but he's missed some time, and Dallas may not make the play-in tournament, let alone the playoffs. But yeah, you just see how many great foreign players there are now. That's why I always will push back, and people talk about how the 90s was a great decade. I think it's one of the worst decades in basketball history in terms of the style of play. You probably liked it because it was defensive, intensity, bloody, all of that stuff, but you didn't have the foreign players that we have now. So the talent pool is much greater now than it was then. Also, the 90s came after quite a bit of expansion in the league. So you had a lot of weak teams. I mean, again, this is probably my pushback to Michael Jordan being the greatest player of all time. That decade was set up for him. Whereas, LeBron's had to go through, I just think, more difficult players and teams to win his championships. But I'll end it on that note. But yeah, these are 4 great players, but they're kind of slotted like Wade and Nowitzki in terms of who's greater. You can have that discussion, and the same thing with Gasol and Parker. It's a pretty good list.
Yeah, and then as far as another player who gets in from the WNBA, Becky Hammon, who obviously now is carving out a really strong career as a coach, assistant coach for Greg Popovich, who we'll talk about in a second. For the Spurs, now the head coach of the Aces in the WNBA. They win a championship her first year as a head coach there, but as a player, 6-time All-Star, 2-time first team All WNBA, 2-time second team All WNBA. And has made all the anniversary teams, 25th anniversary, 20th, 15. So one of the greatest female basketball players of all time, and turning into a hell of a coach. So a very, very deserving Hall of Fame nod for Becky Hammon, who, I think, like you said, all people expect her to be the person that breaks that barrier, should she want it to be the first female head coach in the NBA.
And maybe it's in San Antonio, where she serves as an assistant under Popovich, and Popovich is 73 years old. Although if they get Big Vic, then that's probably going to ignite Pop to stick around for a few years, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think she's the chosen one and the deserving one to be the first female head coach in NBA history, without question.
Yeah, and so as far as Popovich, his accolades, we can name him lots of accolades. 5-time NBA champion, 3-time Coach of the Year. Has the most, I believe he has the most wins in NBA history as a coach. And just a lineage of excellence. Also won a gold medal coach. He is the head coach for the for Team USA in the last Olympics. So one of the greatest head coaches of all time. You could certainly make a case he's the greatest head coach of all time, Sap. And so, yes, absolutely no brainer that he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think there's probably 5 coaches that I would put into the argument. Actually, there's 4. Obviously, in terms chronologically, it would be Red Auerbach,
Yep.
Pat Riley, Phil
Yep.
Jackson, and Popovich.
Yep.
These are guys that all won 5 or more championships. The 5th name I throw in there only won 2 championships, but Chuck Daly deserves
that's who I
more
think
credit.
too, Sap.
Yeah, because he won back-to-back championships, and he had to go through the Celtics with Bird, the Bulls with Jordan, and the Lakers with Magic. So, again, he had a winning record against the Celtics, Bulls, and Lakers in the postseason. That's damn impressive. And he did it with one great player in Isaiah Thomas, a Hall of Famer, and Joe Dumars, an eventual Hall of Famer who was pretty much a role player, Dennis Rodman, and then a bunch of other guys, Bill Laimbeer, John Sally. These were really good players, Mark Aguirre. But to beat those teams, and he did it often. He beat the Celtics often. He beat the Bulls often, lost a 7-game series to the Lakers, and then swept them the next year. I would put him in like number 5. But the big 4, obviously, because they all won 5 or more championships, would be Auerbach, Riley, Jackson, and of course Popovich, who essentially is the Bill Belichick of basketball, right down to the fact that he has kind of a, shall we say, abrasive nature and
military background.
Military background, same thing. They've got to be friends, right? I mean, they've got to be. I mean, I think
the one thing that's interesting about them too is
they're
Belichick.
both Croatian too, right? I mean, so that's their background, and they're very difficult to deal with the media. Although Popovich does it kind of with a wink and a nod more so than Belichick.
Oh yeah, Belichick just spits in their face and tells them to take it. But Belichick, we know, is skewed a little bit more conservative on things. Popovich is obviously very liberal and has made that quite clear. But yes, very, very similar. And I'm sure
it represents the sports too, right? I mean, basketball is much more liberal, football much more conservative. So yeah, but they've got to be friends. I mean, I just would be shocked because Belichick has a friendship with so many of the other great coaches, whether it's Tony La Russa in baseball or, other great football coaches like Nick Saban. I would think that Popovich is his buddy. They're around the same age and have kind of the same view of things outside of politics.
I think that maybe people should be, touring Croatia and looking for the next great coach, Seth. Maybe that's the way to go.
Why not? And the next great basketball player.
Very good. Croatia is a hotbed, obviously, for sports talent. So that's the Hall of Fame class this year. I think it's a really good class. But Sap, that got us into thinking: who would we put in the Hall of Fame that's not in right now? We're not talking about guys like LeBron, who's obviously going to make it, but somebody that has yet to make it that should be in. So, Sap, I'll start with you. Because my feeling on the Hall of Fame is that too many people are in it already. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm the old guy here and I'm going to be the curmudgeon about it. But I have an idea who you're going to pick because I feel like you say him all the time. Let's see if it's still the same guy.
I'm going to surprise you, but unless you've really read my mind. But I agree with you. There's too many people in the Hall of Fame, but there's some omissions that I think are kind of surprising since everybody makes them. Obviously, growing up, my favorite player was Marcus Johnson, not Magic Johnson.
Right. That's who I think you're going to take.
He belongs in there without question. I don't think he's ever going to make it, but I think he is deserving. But I'm going to throw a few other names out at you. One is a player, one is a coach, and one is an executive. In the end, it's going to be the executive who I think deserves it more than anyone. As a player, this is kind of coming out of left field. They do put players in for accomplishments outside of being professionals, right? I mean, Dino Rogers in the Hall of Fame, right, for what he did in Europe. Why isn't Christian Laettner in the Hall of Fame? I don't understand that. He's one of the 10 greatest college basketball players of all time. Had a good, not a great NBA career. In 4 years at Duke, Jet, he went to 4 straight Final Fours, won 2 championships, played in a 3rd national championship game twice, hit game-winning shots to send his team to the Final Four when they were trailing. Like, these weren't tie games that he hit the game-winning shot. They were actually trailing. He was a phenomenal college player, I think he deserves to be in there. As a coach, Dick Motta, who won an NBA championship with the 1978 Bullets, who always underachieved, but he got them through that and was able to win a championship there. He was an accomplished coach at Weber State. The only time the Chicago Bulls were relevant until Michael Jordan showed up was late 60s, early 70s, and he was the head coach of the Chicago Bulls. Then he went to Dallas in 1980, an expansion franchise, got them to the playoffs quickly and actually put up a strong battle against the Lakers in the 88 Western Conference Finals. I think Dick Motta belongs in the Hall of Fame. But the biggest omission to me is Jack McCloskey, who's the former general manager of the Detroit Pistons. I'm giving an awful lot of love to the Detroit Pistons on the podcast, talking about Chuck Daly. Jack McCloskey was that team's general manager. Again, going up against the Celtics, the 76ers, the Bucks were really good at that point, and then getting to the finals and splitting two final series against the Lakers. He was the architect of that team. And again, they did it organically. They were able to draft Isaiah Thomas. Then they surprised everybody taking Joe Dumars middle of the first round in 1985, got John Sally and Dennis Rodman the next year in the draft, was able to trade for Bill Laimbeer. And maybe his biggest move outside of getting Isaiah Thomas was hiring Chuck Daly as head coach. Chuck Daly was a disaster in a short period of time as head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers, but McCloskey saw that he could be an outstanding coach for that team. And the Pistons are always kind of that forgotten team. You know, when we think of the 80s, the Celtics, Lakers, and then the Bulls in the 90s. Well, in between all of that, the Pistons were the best team in basketball for 2-3 years, and he was the architect of that team. He passed away a few years back, but I think Jack McCloskey, more than anyone, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as an executive.
I think it's a good list, Sap. I do want you to know that there is a college basketball Hall of Fame. So, Christian Laettner certainly deserving of that. Is he in it? Let's see.
I would assume he's in that.
He is. He is. It's a recent thing. So, Sap, only 2006 is when they established it. The first class I'm looking at had about, looks like 100 people that they decided to put in the first class of it. But he
Did we make it? I mean, you and I could have made it. We have attended college basketball.
We should have made it. But it is the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield. They don't call it the Professional Basketball Hall of Fame. Right. So I think it's totally a fair point. You're one of the only people I've ever heard advocate for Christian Laettner for anything. He's not a very popular man.
No.
But maybe he's got a friend in you, Sap. So maybe you'll be able to successfully campaign for that.
I do like the guys that no one likes, Aaron Rodgers, Barry Bonds. So maybe put Christian Laettner on that list.
Perfect. Add him right along. For me, again, Sap, I've said this for a long time. If you listen to me, I think there's way too easy to get into the Basketball Hall of Fame. I think there's too many people in it. So I am not going to add a player, not going to add a coach, not going to add an executive. What I am going to add, though, Sap, is an announcer. Johnny Most, the Celtics announcer for a long period of time, legendary. Havlicek steals the ball call, tons of great calls with the Larry Bird Celtics. He is not in the Hall of Fame. Chick Hearn is the Lakers announcer for, a long stretch of time. If Chick Hearn is in, Johnny Most should be in. That's I think that is that's how it should be. So Johnny Most, I think, is long overdue. He died, I think, in 1993, 1990, somewhere around there. So he's been gone for quite a while now. But posthumously, he should certainly get into the Hall of Fame. I think he's one of you can't tell the story of the NBA with some of his calls, and one of the most legendary announcers in all of sports history, in my opinion.
Is he not in because he was so partisan, where Chick Hearn was this smooth broadcaster? I mean, they kind of fit their cities. At the time, Boston was this blue-collar city, and Johnny Most was a different type of broadcaster than Chick Hearn, who was right out of Central Casting. I mean, Chick Hearn had been in movies. Big, tall, good-looking guy. Johnny Most, had that raspy voice, was smoking cigarettes, drinking black coffee. Totally different how they did their jobs. But I was shocked to hear that he wasn't in the Hall of Fame. Again, everyone gets in. Why are you leaving out one of the legendary broadcasters in league history from one of the two most successful franchises? Absolutely should be in there.
Yeah, so he's not. Chick Hearn, to my knowledge, is the only broadcaster. There's a wing for broadcasters, like an accomplishments Kirk Gowdy award. That's not what I'm talking about. Chick Hearn was actually just inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think, again, if he's in, Johnny Most should be in. Who cares if you're partisan? That's your, that's the job of a lot of these guys. Maybe, like you said, in LA, it fits the market. But in Boston, if you're not overwhelmingly rooting for the Celtics while you're calling the games, you're not going to last in the job for very long.
Mike Gorman's in, right, in the broadcasters wing. The
He is in
Celtics
the
play-by-play
yeah,
man
he
for
is in the
NBC
broadcasters
Sports
wing.
Boston.
Yeah,
Deservedly so. Not only a great broadcaster, one
very
of the
recent
nicest people.
inductee. Yes.
Yeah, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he's been doing it for 40 years. And he's one of those broadcasters you can put him alongside anyone, and it's going to work. He's that good. But yeah, at least put Johnny Most in the broadcasters wing. Just for the fact that he was there for so many championships, and it's legendary how he called games. And yeah, Havlicek stole the ball.
That's the most famous call in NBA history.
Sure. And then Bird stealing the pass from Isaiah Thomas and feeding Dennis Johnson in the 87 conference finals. They were again talking about the Pistons. But yeah, it absolutely belongs in there. That's kind of shocking. There's too many people in the Hall of Fame because they put as many, if not more, in the Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, as they do in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And obviously we know what the roster sizes are. It's 4 times more players in the NFL than the NBA, and they have the same size classes going into the Hall of Fame. So thus you're going to get a ton of basketball people in the Hall of Fame and maybe not enough in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So that's my choice, Sep. That's not a player or anything like that, but justice for Johnny Most. That's what I want to be amended into the Basketball Hall of Fame. But that's going to do it for us here, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out their website. Make sure you check out our social medias for all sorts of info about the show and other opinions, polls, interesting facts. You can follow Sap at John Sap 25, and you can follow me at Jet Stryer. Sap, you're about to lose your blue check mark. How are you feeling about that?
They can have it. I'm not paying for it.
I haven't seen anybody who's come out and said, "Oh yeah, I'll pay the $8 for whatever." Even I saw LeBron's not paying the $8 for it. LeBron, what is it? I know we have a minute left.
He's notoriously
He's cheap.
Oh yeah,
He's cheap.
yeah. Oh yeah. The movie Trainwreck, that was not far off from what he is. He's a pretty cheap guy. I mean, again, his background was not of wealth. And in a sense, kind of good for him in that. I hope he tips when he goes to restaurants accordingly. Right, yeah. Shaq is a guy who leaves like a $10,000 tip on a $50 bill. Although I don't think Shaq spends $50 at any restaurant. Not enough food for a big man.
No, but yeah, LeBron's cheap. Not going to pay the $8, but nobody really is. I think it's a kind of a desperate move from Twitter. But you know what, Sap? It was a great era of you having the blue check mark. Happy trails to the check mark.
Thank you.
Yep. But you're verified in my heart still, Sap. So
thank you so much.
I trust that it's you. But still, check out Sap's Twitter, verified or not, at JohnSap25. And you can find the show wherever podcasts are found. Just type in the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back with a couple new podcasts next week as we are very, very close to the playoffs. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you later. See you, everybody.